66th Justice Clearinghouse webinar, Hashtags and Hate Mail. Many agencies report that they struggle to respond to cranky questions about their agency in public forums. During our webinar today, Nina Stively will offer you guidance on constructive public messaging on sensitive industry topics and will help you turn the page on keyboard warriors. Nina Stively is the director of Loudoun County Animal Services in Northern Virginia, an independent government agency that includes the county animal shelter and a team of sworn humane law enforcement officers. Nina is a certified animal cruelty investigator, a certified animal welfare administrator, and an animal control officer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. She still has a 17-year-old cat named Mercury from her very first TNR project and shares her home with some very supportive humans, 5 chickens, 2 cats, 3 dogs, and an assortment of foster animals. I also want to take a moment and thank our friends and partners for helping out with today's webinar. Today's session is done in partnership with the National Animal Care and Control Association. We truly appreciate working with organizations like the NACA who are so committed to enhancing and growing the profession. Now, before we begin, I'd like to also share with you some information about the Justice Clearinghouse. The Justice Clearinghouse is the only peer-to-peer, multidisciplinary educational program for justice professionals that offers the instruction and skills necessary to achieve both individual and organizational transformation. Through our year-round virtual conference, our audience and subscribers develop those crucial skills that are necessary to positively impact themselves and their community. And while anyone can attend our live webinars, paid subscribers are able to access this content on their own schedule with over 500 archived webinars and are also eligible to receive certificates of attendance that may be used when seeking continuing education credits. So if you're not presently a subscriber, I'd invite you to join today and support our work. Now, the last few things I'd like to address with everyone is some basic housekeeping items. First, this event is being recorded and the formal presentation is scheduled to last about 60 minutes and will be available to subscribers on the Justice Clearinghouse website. Second, this is a listen-only event, but you can type in any questions that you have through the GoToWebinar toolbar, and we'll take as many of those questions as possible at the end of the formal presentation. Next, if you experience audio issues during the webinar, such as the sound cutting in and out intermittently, consider dialing in using the phone number included with your emailed invite. When the system asks for a PIN, you can just bypass that by hitting the pound key. Now, we have incorporated several polling questions into this webinar, and just by way of a try run, I'd actually like to ask the first question, which is, how long have you been in your current role or profession in the justice community? Is it 0 to 3 years, 4 to 7 years, 8 to 15 years, or more than 15 years? And I just want to thank everyone for responding to this polling question. It not only helps us understand the response rates of our audience today, but it also helps us understand exactly the level of experience for our audience. And thanks again. I'm going to go ahead and close down the poll and share the results. Wow, a really experienced audience today. 35% of you have been in your profession for 15 or more years. 13% are 8 to 15 years. 23% are 4 to 7 years. And 28% 0 to 3 years. And again, thank you so much for participating. Finally, after today's webinar, there will be a follow-up survey, and we ask that you complete it. Your feedback helps us shape everything that we do here at the Justice Clearinghouse. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn the presentation over to our instructor for today. Nina, it's all yours.
Thanks, Aaron. So I want to thank everyone for coming out today. This is one of my favorite topics, and as I was saying before we got started here, is I love arguing. So I like to argue, but really I only like to argue when I'm right. So I try to make sure that I am right throughout this process, and that I'm going to give you the tools to be right throughout your processes as well. We all know that this is a pretty big issue in our profession, so I'd love to help us figure out ways to conquer these situations together, because the only way to get through it is to just demonstrate you have no tolerance for any kind of nonsense. So let's get started. So as Aaron said, my name is Nina Stively. I work out here in Loudoun County, Virginia. I've worked in New Mexico, and came from Chicago and Massachusetts before that. So I've been a little bit of all over the place. But my heart and my profession are in animal welfare. So currently our animal services organization oversees both the animal shelter and animal control. We are sworn law enforcement officers, but we are not part of the sheriff or police department out here. So they do have full law enforcement powers. We partner with our sheriff's office when needing to execute search warrants and things like that. But they do go through a law enforcement animal control academy here in Virginia. So that is what we are working with out here. The internet has lots of things to say about me. If you chose to Google, you could probably have a field day, but you have to really dig deep for some of the best comments. So obviously people have things to say about you when you are in a public agency, and it seems as though animals are one of the things that ignites a lot of emotion. So anybody who's in animal welfare, animal control, animal sheltering knows that you will get some very intense responses. So people have said pretty much the gamut of things about me and my organizations, but I'm more than happy to say things back to them. So we're all here today to try and figure out what is the problem. What is the situation that brings us all here? And with a number of people that signed up for this webinar, I think we know that online harassment of people in law enforcement and animal control is out of control. It's just become common for folks to really hide behind a screen name or a handle in any number of forums and say all sorts of things online that they never would say to our faces. So we need to figure out how we as a profession can address these situations because it's not going to get better unless we stop the people who are doing this sort of behavior. So I'm going to start off with a poll. And Erin, if you are able to open it up, we are wondering if you, as a professional or your agency, have ever received harassing or aggressive emails, threats, posts, or contacts from members of the public.
Outstanding. And the polling question is open. I see a lot of you voting so quickly. Holy cow, this is great. I really appreciate everyone's response to this and how quickly you're responding. We can get back to the content that much faster. I'll give everyone about 5 more seconds here or so. And I'm going to go ahead and close down the poll. Well, Mina, I'm sure this is not a surprise for you, but 75% of our participants indicated yes. And of course, the flip side, 25% said no. Back to you.
And that's significant. I don't think I need to tell you guys that that's significant, that if you asked someone in just about any other profession if they have received harassing or aggressive emails, threats, posts, or contacts, it would never be 75%. There's very few professions that are so aggressively and openly targeted by people who honestly feel that they know more about what we do than we do. So 75%, it doesn't surprise me, but it disappoints me because we all know that that does take a toll on the people who work in our profession, each other, our colleagues, ourselves, our families. It's a very real problem. So here's a screenshot. This is from New York City Animal Care and Control, and this is something that they get all the time. And they are unfortunately one of probably the biggest punching bags out there because, as we say, anonymity and distance empower insanity. People who will never have to see you to your face, who can hide behind a name. So here, this isn't even a person's real name. We've got Save Lucky the cat, who is belittling and harassing the person who is the PIO for the Animal Care and Control in New York City. There is actually a large number of people who use Twitter as a very aggressive forum for New York City Animal Care and Control, among other agencies, of course. But anytime you want to see how tough it really can be, New York City is unfortunately a tragic example of how incredibly cruel and harassing and disgusting people can be. But you don't deserve this. No one deserves this. Nobody who does what we do does it for the money. We do it because of our commitment to public service. So we need to figure out how we can turn the tables on people who are hiding behind screen names. And so what's at stake? You know, the question is this a battle worth fighting? But I think there is a lot at stake here. You know, we've got the reputation of our profession. So as people in animal welfare and law enforcement, if we continue to let the bullies take over our dialogue, we are going to lose the ground that we've made in our communities. People are not going to trust us to keep them safe. They are not going to trust our decisions, our outcomes, our handling of cases, our handling of particular animals. It's going to really change, I think, how far we have come in many ways in terms of trust in our communities. The reputation of your agency. So your agency specifically might have been targeted for one reason or another. It may have been a case or a situation that the public did not agree with, or that a few individuals did not agree with, and they think your particular agency handled it in a poor way. It doesn't do a whole lot of good to have your reputation damaged on one case, because people will continue. They will continue to remember those cases and bring them back, and it will continue to haunt you for years. We get asked questions out of the blue. I was just telling Aaron before we started that we were asked a question about something our shelter was doing literally 40 years ago. Half of my staff wasn't even alive 40 years ago, so I could not tell you what this organization was doing in terms of law enforcement policies 40 years ago. But that one person holds a grudge, and they believe that whatever we were doing 40 years ago, we must still be doing now, which I don't know if there's any organizations out there that handle cases the same way they do now as they did in the early 80s, but here we are. Your ability to do your job and promote animal welfare or promote any sort of fair and equitable law enforcement can be impacted when people are harassing and changing the perception of those in your community. I had an officer go and was going to assist someone with an animal who he had requested that we go out there and take the animal to be euthanized because the animal is very, very old. The people in his apartment complex did not realize what that officer was doing. They thought that she was taking his dog away. And while she was actually there to do a public service and help him, because the man did not have the means to carry this large dog down the stairs or to euthanize the dog, she went out there, retrieved the dog, and was greeted by people who were throwing things at her and yelling things at her as she went up the stairs. So that's no way to do our jobs. We need to really change the perspective of people in our communities, and online bullies can really get in the way of that. And then you've got your mental health. And I know there's some of you who are going to say, I don't care what somebody says online. And you can say that, and that's great. And maybe that's true. And I'll say that too, but I hate letting things go. And I'm not a person who's going to feel broken down by the comments. And that doesn't mean that someone who does feel broken down is handling it wrong, but I have a hard time letting some of this stuff go. And that impacts your life. Compassion fatigue in any of the helping professions is very, very common. We can't let somebody's harassment chip into our lives and our careers. So if you are taking some of this home with you at the end of the day, it's impacting you, and we've got to figure out a way to stop it. And so here's a great comment from a psychotherapist who just talks about compassion fatigue. And this is animal care specific, but in terms of law enforcement, the reality is that compassion fatigue is very, very real. It has tremendous impacts. You know, I debated whether or not to put a poll out there in terms of the number of people who have experienced PTSD, depression, or know someone in our profession who has taken their own life, because it's a painful thing to even ask, but the reality is that so many of us know people who have been profoundly impacted by this work. Law enforcement of all types, including animal control officers, are in the highest bracket for on-the-job suicides. And that's no joke. That's not a matter of, you know, of opinion or of figuring out maybe things could be done a little bit differently. That is a tremendous indicator that there is something very wrong with the mental health care or mental health impacts that is occurring for those who are in law enforcement and animal care. So we need to really figure out ways to support one another, because there is no reason that those of us who are in this field should be helping others, humans and animals, should be taking such a tremendous burden that we are losing one another. And so who are we up against? Kathy Bates. So this is what I always sort of envision is the person on the other side of the keyboard who has a lot to say, and is just frenzied. She is just, she's got her coffee and she's mad. And a lot of times these people aren't local, so they are activists of any number of directions. So it could be somebody who is relating to an anti-law enforcement group. There are, as we know, there are many groups who are just anti-law enforcement in general. There could be animal rights activists. Oftentimes these people are not local, and it's very important for you as someone who oversees any kind of social media to start figuring out if you want to deal with your local people in a different way. For us, we will talk to anyone. However, I will say that if someone is from out of jurisdiction and we know that they are, we will call them out and we'll be gentle about it, but we will say, oh, are you a resident of Loudoun County? We would love to have you come on by and see the facility, or we would love to talk to you directly. Frequently, they will then not respond or then say, oh, no, I live in, Seattle, or no, I live in Florida. Or at least it makes people kind of think twice about what the person is saying if you are offering up kind of an olive branch, but the person perhaps doesn't actually have a stake in what is happening on a local level. You get your grudge holders, and these are folks who every time something happens, they bring up the exact same situation. Oh, are you going to handle this case the way you handled the other one? And they don't go away. They often will not give up the grudge until they have somebody else to take up a grudge with. So hopefully that is someone who is not you, but it might be. They might come up with a fresh one. You've got other agencies. This is less common, but when it does happen, it's pretty tough because you will occasionally get other organizations, either other animal shelters or rescues or other public agencies who perhaps do not agree with the way you are doing things. This could be political in nature. Whatever it is, it's potentially damaging, certainly. Disgruntled volunteers. And this could go for anybody who has some sort of inside information as to what's going on with your organization. Someone who perhaps once did a ride along, somebody who volunteered with your animal shelter, any number of people who have a little bit more information than your average person, but were dissatisfied with their experience. And then you've got the generally uninformed. So people who really have no idea what you are doing. They're a little bit more casual generally in their harassment because they're not, I don't want to say smart enough, but they're not generally organized enough to do research as to what is accurate for your particular organization. Those are the easiest to deal with because you can just correct them and often they go away. So what are we going to do about it? Poll number 2. So if you could answer this, can you tell us what are you currently doing when you receive harassing or aggressive contacts on social media? Your options are to ignore them, hide them, and that means so others cannot see their comments but can click hide or unhide, block them so they cannot continue to post, address them publicly, so you would respond right there. Say if it was on Facebook, you would reply to the comment, or address them privately, so either over email, reach out by phone, or in a private message.
Great. Nina, the polling question is open. We'll give folks about another 10 seconds to respond. Folks, this is a please select one kind of option. So let us know what you're doing the most often if you're doing a couple of these different options. And we're going to go ahead and close down the poll. Thank you so much for responding. And let's see. All right, Nina, 33% of the audience indicated that they ignore them. 7% said that they hide them. 13% said block them. 34% said address them publicly, and 13% said address them privately. Back to you.
Fantastic. So that's some great information. So we can see that there's a pretty wide range as to what people are doing. So the question is as to why you are choosing the option that you're choosing. I'm most excited about the people who are addressing them publicly because that's exactly what we're going to be focusing on. But for those who have other tactics, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means we need to figure out if that's the right move for what you are experiencing. So you've got your options. So to block or ban somebody from your page. So for those of you who are the 13% who are blocking them, I hope you are not publicly funded. And I say this with all seriousness because recently, and I can say this with unfortunately a fair amount of authority because it originated in Loudoun County, if you are publicly funded, it has been ruled unconstitutional to block someone from your publicly funded animal shelter or animal control or law enforcement agencies communication. Public forums are considered an open forum for discussion. It's not going to be helpful to you in the long run. It is going to potentially get you into a lot of legal hot water. Please, please do not do it. This is about 2 years old, and I'm going to just jump ahead real quickly to the next slide and I'll come back. But this is the statement from the local, from the Supreme Court ruling for the circuit that is out here in this part of the country, that essentially says that when you have a Facebook page on behalf of a public agency, this becomes a public forum. If you're inviting citizens to make comments, you cannot filter out what is being said. So this is Ms. Randall. She is the chair of our board, a fantastic supporter of what we do. And unfortunately, she has been subject certainly to plenty of harassment. And in the course of that harassment, she did block for, and I believe it was actually for about 3 hours, she blocked somebody from one of her pages and then unblocked them. And as a result was hit with a pretty serious set of allegations, and it was eventually ruled unconstitutional. So please do not block or ban people from your pages. Your next option would be to ignore them. So if you want to ignore them, they're going to continue ranting. They have the option then to essentially get more people on board with what they are saying than what you are saying. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to give somebody a chance to use your platform as theirs. And sometimes it is active. Sometimes they might go as far to say is who's with me. But in other cases, it may just be a matter of them saying something, unfortunately, in a coherent and educated way that makes people believe that they are correct. So ignoring those folks has a time and place. I mean, there's going to be situations where, again, preserve your mental health, preserve your organization's reputation, and sometimes just being quiet is okay. And you can avoid the rabbit hole of maybe going down something that you know is not going to end well. But it does put you in a potentially risky situation. So I generally prefer to take a stand. You are risking, of course, opening the floodgates because you've said something now, and now everybody wants to get a piece of it, especially if it's very, very controversial. But the majority of people who are reading your page are not commenting. And that's something I can't say enough. What you say on your page is, for some people, news. And most people don't comment on the news. Most people don't comment in the comments section of anything. They just read it and take it for what it's worth. So those are really your target audience. The people who are arguing with you, you're not going to change their minds, but you absolutely can take them down a notch. You can devalue what they are saying if it is critical and inaccurate, and you can boost up what you are saying because what you are saying, certainly I hope so, is accurate and honest and transparent. So I always get the question of when is it hate speech, and can I take down something that is hateful or hate speech? And this is going to come back a little bit to the question of those who are hiding comments on their page. It doesn't matter when it's hate speech because hate speech is still protected by the First Amendment. So I know that's a terrible thing to hear, and you're thinking that can't possibly be true, but I'm sorry to tell you that it is. So what you want to try and figure out is work with the legal folks from your city or county. Every city or county has an attorney who is able to help you with significant matters. And if you have a social media page, you need to have a social media policy. In that policy, you need to very clearly outline when somebody will be hidden from your page. Again, they should never be blocked because you're looking at a violation of the First Amendment. However, if someone is using, so for example, on our page, we reserve the right to hide anyone who is using profanity, making open threats, or is referring to an outside website. So, and that's honestly, that's just a web security question in terms of linking people to other websites. We don't want certainly pornography or other things like that being linked through our page. But the others in terms of profanity, you know what the swear words are. So if someone's using that, you don't want that in your thread because for the most part, Facebook and other social media is considered to be a rated G type forum in that anybody has access to it at any time. So certainly things that are said are not always G rated, but you want to try and keep it available that it's appropriate for anyone of any age to read. And profanity is something that can be hidden, as well as something that would be a direct and overt threat. Make sure you know exactly what that means, again, according to your city or county attorneys, because you want to make sure that you're protected and you're not hiding things that you shouldn't. Keep in mind, if something is hidden, it still appears in that thread. It just says this comment is hidden, which means on Facebook, you could click on it and still read that. However, it does just essentially slow down the scan through. So again, profanity is a great example. We have plenty of people who like to say lots of things and get very passionate about it, both pro and con our organization, and will occasionally use profanity. If we have the opportunity, we will tell them, I'm sorry, your comment was blocked because or was hidden because we cannot have profanity on the page. If you'd like to edit it, feel free. Otherwise, it will just be hidden. Just communicate with people, because those who are using profanity are often the most heated. You don't want people to not understand why you have hidden something, especially when they feel it's in support of something you've done. So what this really comes down to is that there's a lot of people out there who think they can do your job better than you can. And this is really because they have no idea what you do all day. So people have a lot to say. You know, we have our law enforcement vehicles and our officers are uniformed. And we got a comment one day about, I have no idea what that guy was doing. As far as I could tell, all he was doing was sitting in his truck and eating a hot dog. Well, I might judge him for eating a hot dog, but people eat lunch, and anybody who works in any kind of marked vehicle knows that someone's going to come right on up to you anytime they see you parked. So he happened to be eating lunch, and that's okay. Our officers do not get designated lunch breaks. They eat in between calls, as so many of you do. So when someone criticizes, feel free to point out, it's okay. He was being normal. He's not just chilling. That's just part of his work day, and eating is normal. I know that sounds ridiculous to say out loud, but it sounds ridiculous when somebody says something like all he's doing is eating hot dogs. So please do not hesitate to say something equally ridiculous back when someone says something just so absurd that you can't let it go. So I always suggest you be proactive. When there is the opportunity to make sure that some of your comments are kind of cut off at the pass, if you've got frequently asked questions for your organization, have an FAQ page on your website, on your official website, so that if people ask you the same questions over and over again, you can just refer them back to your website. It's important that people use your website occasionally. Most people are going to prefer to use social media. Unfortunately, your website's going to have hopefully a lot more information, but we all know anybody who has Humane Society in their name is going to be questioned. Are you related to the national organizations? So these guys wisely have a link right on their page of what they are, who they are not, where their funding comes from, to just dispel that myth right away. And when people ask, it's a great way for them to send them right back here without having to paste all this information. So this really goes for anything. If people have a question that you see appearing over and over on your social media, please create that FAQ page, because it will give people the opportunity to go and really get detailed answers, and then read through some of the other questions they might have at the same time. Prepare a statement and get ready to paste. So when you have something that is especially controversial or has drawn a lot of attention of the public, don't be afraid to use that same statement over and over again, because people will ask you, as we know, the same question over and over again. So SBC of Texas was targeted by someone who alleged that they had a large number of dogs and were targeting pit bulls as a group of dogs, and were just euthanizing them all after the hurricanes. So this was not the case at all, and they knew this. And they had hundreds and hundreds of comments on this thread who kept saying, are you going to euthanize these dogs? I can't believe you're doing this. Well, they had a statement that was very well written, and they pasted it. Last I counted was somewhere around 45 times on this thread, the exact same comment, because who has time to answer the exact same question over and over again? Fortunately, you'll see someone like this down in the bottom right, where she says, you ever feel like you're talking to the wall? She got 8 other people who recognize that SPCA is saying the same thing over and over. It doesn't mean that you are creating an impersonal response. It means that you are answering them with facts and you are being consistent. So please do not hesitate to use factual answers and use them repeatedly. Constructive callouts. This is one of my favorite posts of all time. I looked through the attendance list and I didn't see anybody from Anchorage, but I think this is really well written, and I love it. So I would have it on a T-shirt if I could, because this is exactly what we see. So this is a cat. They posted this cat. She's curled up in a box. She's got a little towel. There's nothing particularly upsetting about this photo. It is a very standard photo of an animal at an animal shelter. The cat looks clean. She looks groomed. She has a hiding box, which is industry best practice. She has a towel. So there's plenty of good going on here. However, someone says, too bad this little angel wound up at the Nazi death camp for animals. Someone's baby for sure. So Anchorage decided to take the reins on the situation, and they responded to her and they asked, I'm sorry, it was a male. They responded and said, maybe you're interested in adopting or fostering or volunteering. So maybe you should be productive. So Anchorage wasn't playing. Not only did they respond to this person who had some pretty aggressive words for the organization, they then screenshotted what she said and shared it with everybody again. So they went out there and not only did they address somebody who was being completely inappropriate, but they used her essentially by saying, this is detrimental to what we do. If you want to help us, here's how you can help us. So they turned her criticism into something really powerful. And I think that this level of tact and honestly professionalism is something that we should not shy away from. They very clearly outline what could have been done better and how negative statements impact the people who work there and the mission of the organization. So this to me is really the gold standard of what we should be looking at when someone just comes so far out of left field and criticizes an effort. When private posts get a little hairy. So very rarely will my organization respond to a private post. So, and when I say private, I mean a post that is done on an individual's page. So this case was an anomaly because I honestly don't know why anybody who works at an animal shelter or an animal control has seen a dog that looks like this probably about 5 times a year for your entire career. There is nothing, and the dog was perfectly fine. I don't want to talk poorly of the dog who eventually came to live at our shelter for a couple of months, but this is a very generic dog. I will never know what compelled 608 people to share his photo and his story and generate 300 comments on just a random individual. And this person is not a known animal rights person. She is not an activist of any sort. She is literally just a lady who posted on her page, hey, I found this dog. He looked pretty skinny, so I brought him in and fed him. Anybody know who he belongs to? So for whatever reason, public went bananas over this dog. There were lots of rumors and questions and stories going on and on about what was going to happen to this dog when he came to the shelter, to the point where it was getting more traffic than anything that we'd posted on our own page in years. And we knew the dog was going to come to the shelter, and we felt that it was most appropriate to address it. Again, this is just an individual's page. She does not use any sort of security settings on her page. Unfortunately for her, because I'm sure she received many, many comments and follows and all sorts of things. But once this link came to our attention through the 608 shares, we decided that we needed to go through and address some of the things that were being said. So we followed the Anchorage model and called out some false statements and offered ways for people to help. We kept following up, and the goal was to really bring people back to our page, which is where we're able to provide accurate information. So we rely heavily on data, of course, and you'll see here, this is just one of the sets of comments that was underneath his story. So, someone says they don't trust us, too many stories, they're known to kill, and then hence the name animal control. So then you've got a couple of people who say things like, oh no, they're not, they're pretty good. And then someone else says, oh no, they're going to put him down if he's not claimed. I know firsthand. So of course, we're trying to figure out who these people are. Are these people who actually know things? Who knows? And then, you get a couple more questions, somebody else, do something essentially. And so we just created our stock statement and started pasting because there were hundreds of comments. And with all the shares out there, it actually became difficult for us to figure out where we should be answering all the questions about this particular dog. For some reason, people thought he was a puppy. I'm going to go back to the picture for a second. This is not a puppy. I don't know. I don't know why they think he was a puppy. This dog was old as dirt. He was a perfectly nice dog. There was nothing spectacular about this dog, but he was an old, generally unhealthy dog. He eventually did get adopted, I will say that, but not by any of the people on this thread. So we made sure that they knew that he was available. We went through and discussed what our legal policy was, so what our current live release was, what we do in terms of when we euthanize animals. We discussed the state required stray hold, reunion with lost pet owners, and then adoption evaluation. So we call people out. If you're interested in fostering for his medical or behavioral issues, we're more than happy to have their help. Please email to volunteer. 0 emails to volunteer. That's probably not a surprise to anyone here, but brace yourselves that 0 people from any of these threads who all had hundreds of comments about this dog and what we were going to do this dog came through to volunteer. So since people continued to talk about it, we decided to point out that none of them were actually doing anything valuable. So we said the day and we said, as of this day, we still haven't received any applications. We know lots of people are saying that they're interested in this dog, but here's all of his medical and behavioral issues. Where are y'all? So putting it out there again. And then below, you'll see someone saying, oh, I'll adopt him. And anybody who has a social media page involving animals gets the people who say, oh my gosh, I'd love to have him. Call them out. I can't say that enough. If someone says, I love this animal, call them out. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is because you want to actually get to people who might really want the animal and need that push and don't know what the next steps are. And 2 is to get people to actually acknowledge when they are lying to you. Because if somebody sees, oh, I'm going to adopt him underneath the picture of an animal, they're going to assume that that person adopted them. Other people assume that what folks say on social media is true. We know full well that it's not. We get the I'll adopt him 100 times over. Call them out. That person didn't come, in case you're all on pins and needles. So then here's another one. So this is more comments, of course, from the same thread. So, oh my gosh, you called this kill shelter. I can't believe you did this. And again, keep in mind, this is just a regular lady. She says at some point, she fed him rice, and it turns out she's a vegan. And people just laid into her for feeding this dog rice. And she's, well, I didn't have any meat. I didn't have any cheese. I'm just trying to feed the dog. The lady really was trying. So she was certainly not expecting any of this. And then the comments really get heated for a while here. So the black comment at the top and then the black comment with the smiley face are the same person. And I highlighted this because this is like a unicorn. And if you ever get one of these, you should print it out and frame it, because this is someone admitting they're wrong on the internet. It never happens. So the person originally says, you call the kill shelter, nice going, frowny face. And then later on they say, my apologize, you are correct. I should have gotten the facts straight. So occasionally that happens. That is very, very exciting. So when that happens, awesome. We ended up commenting and thanking this person, saying, oh, let us know if you have any questions. And the person below is also sort of interesting because they are not our biggest fan. However, they are also asking people to follow up. Who's going to volunteer? Who's going to help this animal? Who knows what the deal is? The shelter's not ideal, so if you don't like it, let's try and fix this. So on those threads, you want to jump in when possible. The time will also come when you have to say something that is complicated for your organization. And these can be very painful and sensitive topics. Please do not shy away from them. Don't hide serious information, because people need to understand what you do. And what we do is not always easy. We are vulnerable. We are honest. We are people who are doing the very best we can with challenging situations. And those of you who are in law enforcement that are not animal related, you have just as many of these. don't hesitate to point out the struggle that some of these difficult cases put you in, the challenges that your organization goes up against when you are so desperately trying to do the right thing and have a lot of emotional sort of questions and turmoil and know the impacts of that decision on your community. So this particular shelter is one that we work with, and this dog was in their shelter for 5 years. And over the course of those 5 years, that dog was irreparably damaged, which is what happens when an animal is in an institution for 5 years in a concrete kennel without indoor-outdoor access, with maybe 1 or 2 walks a day. You can't put a social animal in a box and expect them to come out okay. And that essentially is what they tell people. They relay the challenge of the situation. And because they are so heartfelt about the entire thing, they describe, the challenge of making this decision for this dog. Overwhelmingly, of their 822 responses or reactions, I want to say it was something like over 800 of them were positive or were sad, which is fine. There was a dozen, maybe angries. And people are going to be angry. That's fine. But the way that they phrase this empowered other people to support them as well. So you want to really think about that, is make sure that you are really relaying emotion in these difficult situations, because if you are all facts all the time, even when you're law enforcement, it doesn't do you that much good. People want to know that you are human, and you're, again, going to have your haters. But if you can figure out a way to really make sure that people trust you by showing them that there's emotion behind the decisions that you are making, um, enforcing the law still has feeling. And that doesn't mean that we have to hide it all the time. Keeping emotion out of our decisions is one thing, but making sure people know that there's emotion attached to it is another. So this brings us to this one. And this was a case that came out of my own organization. And I'm always torn on posting something like this, because this is actually not, this is something I don't recommend you do. But if you're going to do it right. And this is done right. So I'm sure I wish I could see your faces, but if anybody out there has, I'll say it nicely, an activist page dedicated to speaking against their organization in the community, or a particularly active social group of some kind on social media, they will share your worst days far often than they share your best. And in this particular situation, there was a dog who had been hit by a car, was on the side of the road, and we went, scanned the dog for microchip, and did not pick up the body. We do occasionally pick up bodies. That is not part of our general role. When our officers are able to, they will pick up bodies of animals that are uh, in one piece and bring them back to the shelter. In this particular case, it was an over 100-pound dog and a single female officer on the side of the road. She had her lights on, people were not moving over. And instead of really getting into all of those details, the local group posted, animal control came out, left the dead body there, and then hundreds of comments followed where people said, that officer is worthless trash, she is repulsive, how does she go to bed at night, I hope she thinks of this dog's face when she lays down, like just horrible critical comments. And this particular officer came out and said essentially how their behavior is impacting her. She said that in 4 years, it was the first one that she left behind after going to pick up, and scan our dead animals in our community. So the reality is that her heartfelt response changed the entire dynamic of that conversation. I would never, ever recommend that an individual officer speak on their own behalf. And while this one actually went really well, and you'll see the people below saying they're apologizing for their wrong assumptions. I'm so sorry someone called you worthless. Thank you for trying. I'm in tears. And 74 people had positive responses to what she said. The problem with this is that now her name is out there, and I would never want anybody on my staff to put themselves in a position where they can be personally harassed. My staff does not deserve that. I am the head of my organization. If people want to harass someone, I am the face that I'm happy to have them associate with anything they disagree with. I never want any of my officers to have to feel unsafe. And when an individual comments regarding something that goes on professionally, they are putting themselves in a position of risk. So in the event that something like this happens, I would encourage your professional page to have a formal statement or a formal response on behalf of the individual rather than having the individual go out there, because we do want our officers to be safe. We want to, they are tough and strong men and women out there, but that does not mean that we want to put them in a position of vulnerability. So ultimately, this isn't about winning your online squabbles. You want to preserve your reputation. You want to take a stand, and you cannot let stuff go. You need to address things immediately and repeatedly when necessary to make sure that your reputation is not going to be compromised. This isn't about selling people, I'm right and you're wrong and you got your facts all screwed up. It is about being honest and really changing the way the dialogue is on social media. So if you decline to work with someone, you need to tell them why. And this could be, you might have a private agency who is offering legal services to someone. You might have another rescue who wants to work with you. You might have any number of people who want to partner with you, and there could be any number of reasons. It could be that you don't have an MOU with that jurisdiction. It could be that you don't have proper contracts in place. It could be that there's financial reasons. It could be policy discrepancies. Whatever it is, be very transparent as to why you are not working with someone. So, for example, we were approached to try and work with an organization, a very large national organization, in who's currently, or at this time, was doing some work down in Texas. Their mission goes in direct opposition to what our mission is, and I'm not willing to compromise our organization's integrity for any of that. So keep in mind, when you tell somebody why you are not going to work with them, that might end up on social media too. So plan your words carefully when you turn someone down for any sort of partnership, because your words are not going to be forgotten once they're in writing. We all know that. FOIA is real, and even if it isn't, screenshots are. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you're declining any kind of partnership, make sure you are very transparent as to why. So that is just about everything. If you guys have questions, I am very hopeful that you do. I'm more than happy to answer them. But I want you guys to stay safe out there. Make sure that we are, doing the best every single day. But make sure that you're looking out for yourself and your agency and your mental health, because it is so important. And no internet battle worth fighting is worth your safety.
Nina, thank you so much for a fantastic presentation. I can't tell you how much I got out of what I'm calling your many use cases with screenshots of the conversations. I mean, I think it did a great job of demonstrating what people can expect if they haven't seen it and what a proper response looks like. So thank you so much for that. Folks, if you have questions for Nina, please do type them into the GoToWebinar toolbar, and we'll get through as many of those questions as possible. I do want to let you know that our next social media webinar is scheduled for May 19th, when Katie Nelson with the Mountain View Police Department will present on Stand Up, Stand Out, how social media enhances your staying power. And again, that webinar date is May 19th. And if you're ready, Nina, we can go ahead and start working through some of the questions we've received.
Yes, please.
Awesome. So our first question is kind of a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but I think it's a good question nonetheless. But I appreciate if you don't feel like you want to answer it. So it's in the past year, we've seen a real increase in law enforcement agencies in ensuring their personnel receive the wellness training and access that they need. Are you seeing a similar movement in animal welfare organizations?
I wish I could ask a clarifying question. Can you read it again? Is that it? I wonder if they mean wellness in terms of mental health wellness. Is that
Yep,
what it sounds like it's
I think
referring
it is
to?
the mental health wellness, exactly.
I think that it's growing. I think that people are starting to recognize the impacts of compassion fatigue and the stress of any sort of law enforcement on the people who are actually performing that work every single day, and animal control is no exception. I think that NACA has done a great job really pushing for people to understand that animal control is a profession. It is not just a hobby. It is not just the job that you drop somebody into when you don't want them to work in front of people anymore, that it really is a professional goal for people. It is a career track. So with that professionalization, I think we are seeing a greater understanding of the mental health impacts on the organizations out there. Compassion fatigue trainings are widely available. University of Florida had a great compassion fatigue training that was available online for the first time. I think they just did that about 18 months ago. And compassion fatigue sort of training of any kind is something that I would strongly advocate for any organization evaluating as part of their regular staff training models. So I think the word is getting out there. The release certainly of the information that animal control officers are in that high risk bracket for on-the-job suicides is very telling. And when you relay that information to those who are funding your budgets, I think that is kind of a game changer. It makes people realize that this is not just feelings and not just kittens and sad puppies and someone being mean to you on the internet. This is a real situation with real living impacts.
Absolutely. And let's see, our next question is, when talking about First Amendment rights, what does publicly funded mean? Does it include organizations that receive grant funds from a public entity, or is it just when you're fully funded from a city or county budget?
I would defer to your local attorney on that. Typically, it is only going to refer to organizations who are municipally funded. So the primary source of your funding would be from taxpayer dollars. Grants or contracts, not so much. However, there's going to be questions in terms of what pertains to FOIA for your organizations, and those would be impacted in the same way. So if you are subject to FOIA, usually if you have a contract, say with a municipality, so if you're a private agency contracting, anything related specifically to that contract may still be subject to FOIA. Your performance of job duties in terms of what should be discussed on social media and how it could be addressed or censored would probably fall under that same bracket. But I would definitely confer with your local attorney on that.
Great advice. Great advice. Thank you so much. Okay, our next question is, do you recommend that just the PIO handle all social media responses for a shelter? And if so, does that mean that they're essentially on call to respond to issues 24/7?
I hesitate to say yes, because talk about burnout, but yes, I think if you can truly narrow the number of people who are answering your questions, then that is your ideal situation. A PIO is kind of always on call, so to speak, but what we do, for example, is we have a group of volunteers who are not official responders, so to speak, but they recognize when something might be getting a little hairy or getting out of hand, and they jump in. And they're not by any means speaking on behalf of the organization, but they may jump in and sort of keep things at bay after hours. If someone sends us a direct message, we have out of office replies for everything. So for our email box, for our Facebook Messenger, so that anytime somebody sends us a message, it does say this is checked from 8:30 to 5 on weekdays. So it does help people remember that this is, while it is always accessible to them, it doesn't always mean that it is staffed. So making sure people understand if there's a delay in response, that it is because you are staffed by one person, or you are a volunteer organization, whatever it is, make sure you're transparent as to why people are not getting instant responses. But I do recommend having less people be your official voice, because you do want to have a sense of branding for your organization and really make sure that your messaging is consistent, especially on controversial topics.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and certainly appreciate that. So the next comment is, I really appreciated the formula that you shared of calling out false statements and then offering ways to help. Are there situations when you find that this approach is not recommended?
Uh, well, I think it depends on the person. One of our local community pages has an individual who, for lack of a better word, is just off a rocker. I mean, just the person is not mentally stable and they go off on just crazy extremist tangents all the time. And that individual essentially has earned their own reputation for being a radical extremist in these local community forums. So when it's somebody who is completely extreme and clearly not communicating in a stable or informed way, there's not a whole lot of use in calling someone like that out. However, if they kind of go on one of their angry tangents on our page, I will make sure that we have one of our stock statements referring to, one of the cases that they think that they know about, um, and just sort of try to keep things on track. People can really take any number of approaches and talk about any number of things on your page at any given time. There is no off topic when it comes to social media in people's minds. People think that anything is relevant, or now is the perfect time for me to talk about that one dog situation where you didn't deal with my neighbor's barking dog 11 years ago and then it died and it was your fault. So don't hesitate to address things factually, but recognize that sometimes if you are proactive enough over a period of time, people are going to stop asking the crazy questions, except for the crazies. And the crazies will always be there. But hopefully, through being very proactive and calling out people consistently in it, I mean, it can be a job for a while, but if you are really consistent about responding to people who are just factually inaccurate about what you are doing, eventually they are less interested in arguing with you, and you start having this core of people who will respond on your behalf, and it's amazing. um, we have we have some really great experiences where, recently someone posted some cats that they found and they didn't want to bring to the shelter because they thought we would kill them. Well, there were probably a dozen people had commented about how wrong this person was, and hey, look back to here, and they were linking back to our page for us because we are so proactive with doing that on our own page that other people are now copying and pasting our material, people that I have no idea who they are, and then posting it on threads for us. So that is kind of your goal. Your goal is to have enough of your information available so consistently that people can look at it and say, oh, I'll respond to this for you. You don't have to. I know more about the shelter than this person does, and give them that confidence to answer your questions for you.
Great. And our last question for today is, do you have recommendations for shelters with personalities who are repeat harassers? We've publicly responded with facts on their page in the thread. That didn't go well and resulted in tons of people leaving nasty reviews on the Facebook page. And we've also tried to reach out directly but privately. They just don't get it and double down. Do you have any suggestions?
Reach out to them publicly would be my suggestion. We have done that. So we have a group that has lots to say about us, and we decided that part of our strategic plan was going to be transparency, which of course any public agency it should be. But the perception is with anything animal control or animal shelter or law enforcement related, they think there's all these secrets that go on, and there really aren't. There's not secrets. So we really tried to go above and beyond to create this transparency, and this one particular group just felt like we were still hiding all these secrets and we're, making all these closed door decisions. And so there were actually two groups. And initially what we did was, I had open office hours. So the first Friday of every month, you can come on down and we're happy to have you. So anybody, anytime, come on down. And so we had a small group of people and they came down the first Friday of every month for probably about 18 months. And every time it was like they thought there was going to be some kind of gotcha. Like they say, well, we want to see the back hallway today. I said, okay, sure. I'll walk you through the whole building. Watch your step. They're still mopping. So you walk them through, and they actually stopped coming because they ran out of things that they thought they could accuse us of because there was nothing to see. There's nothing to see here, folks. Move along. So there was that. And then the other group was just much more enthusiastic, I guess you could say, with some of their opinions about the organization. So we decided, again, as part of our transparency mission, to host an Ask Me Anything, which for those of you who have tried this is daunting, but it's a live question and answer. So anybody could ask us any questions at any time. and we would broadcast the entire thing live. So it was myself and the chief of our officers, and we invited the group who has a lot to say about us to host it. They couldn't say no, because how can you say no if you're giving someone a chance to expose all the wrongdoing that you think that they're doing? So they said, "Oh yeah, we're in. We're count us in." So, okay, awesome, great. So we set the date. As soon as they said yes, we put the word out there. We put advertised, co-hosted with so and so's group, so that their name was out there as co-hosting. And 3 days before the Ask Me Anything was scheduled to air, and again it was live, I said, "Hey guys, you guys all ready?" And they said, "Oh, well, we haven't gotten any questions." I said, "Oh, you haven't gotten any questions?" I said, "I can get you some questions." I said, "Well," "we'll solicit for questions on our page." I said, "Oh, yeah, well, we might have to cancel if we don't get enough questions." And I'm thinking, oh, I know they got questions, because I could see on their page where people on their fan group were starting to ask questions, but they weren't the type of questions that I think they were hoping for, which would have been antagonistic. So we put the call out on our page. Hey, don't forget, so and so group is hosting Ask Me Anything on Saturday. So send us your questions. And so we got probably 40 questions, all of which were very good, some of which were provocative. And we sent them to them. Here you go. Lots of questions for you guys to ask. See you Saturday. So we're all ready. We're amped, and we're fully prepared, because again, we're a public organization. Everything's transparent. So Friday night, I went home to go sort of, take a deep breath before Saturday morning's Ask Me Anything. And I got a message that tragically flu had swept through their entire group and they weren't going to be able to host us. So very sad. However, that could have been a great opportunity for them to have said that we backed out of their event. So instead, we decided to do it anyways. And we said, "Well, so sorry, the so-and-so group was not able to come today, but we look forward to trying it again with them, and we're still going to host it." So we went forth and did the Ask Me Anything anyways, and just hosted it live on our own page and got plenty of questions, and it went wonderfully. So I think the thing is call them out publicly. I know that was a long way of saying it, but so often bullies of any kind have absolutely no stones, and they are not going to say anything to your face that they would rather say online. So don't give them the opportunity to hide. Put it out there publicly. Say, I welcome your questions and I want us to work together on this. And we never guilt tripped them. We never embarrassed them. We just said, "Hey, so sorry they weren't able to make it. We'd love to reschedule with you," and then went on. So there was no opportunity for them to say that we canceled. But the reality is that they did, and that was their choice. So don't give them the power of saying that you're hiding. If you're not hiding, make it very clear as to who is.
Got it. Nina, I'm wondering if I could squeeze in one more question. It's a really good
Yeah.
one that we just received.
Yeah.
The next question is, if I post my facts and someone comes after me and says, "Well, how do you know?" What is my best response, especially when my work doesn't want me to reveal that I work for animal control?
Oh, well,
Right?
you're,
It's a good question. I
yeah.
don't know if there's any easy answers, but
Well, and I think that your work needs to support you, because you should not be answering any questions on behalf of the organization if they don't want you to. So don't put yourself in a position of risk, essentially, by people wanting to know how you got that information. Figure out if there can be a social media policy, if you can be an admin, if you can perhaps direct people to only communicate with you in a certain way. So maybe it's just on Twitter, or it's just through, your Facebook, question and answer page, a very sort of loosely managed page. Don't, I would just say, don't answer questions that people are asking you because they know who you are. So I know that's a lousy answer, because you want to help people and you want to answer their questions, but if your work doesn't want you to acknowledge that you are who you are, then you shouldn't either. And just answer people in sort of a gentle way and say, if they already know that you work, say, for animal control, um, don't hesitate to say, "I'm really sorry, but I can't speak on behalf of the organization." And you can say that in a way that is your own words and is most comfortable to you, but don't put yourself in a position to speak on behalf of an organization who is not ready for an individual to speak on their behalf.
Yep, I definitely understand that. Nina, again, thank you so much for sharing such great information with our audience today, folks. I wanted to make sure that you knew in about an hour, actually 55 minutes, we're going to be doing our next webinar. The title is Seeing Clearly in 2020, Trends and Challenges in Animal Control, and it's presented from people on the board of directors for the National Animal Care and Control Association. It promises to be a phenomenal webinar. And if you've got some time, I definitely recommend you joining us for that session. Again, I want to thank Nina for taking the time to present today and to you for taking the time to join us. With that, this concludes this morning's Justice Clearinghouse webinar. Take care of yourself, everyone, and bye now.